Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 82, The Medicine. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. When Brent Koster was sentenced to life in prison in 1975, the judge made his opinions clear, saying, "The crimes you and Mr. Raines are guilty of are the types of crime that justifies, in my opinion, consideration of re-establishing the death penalty. What my personal beliefs are is immaterial. I do feel, Mr. Koster, that you should not ever be released back into free society." And Brent Koster himself, now age 64, agreed then and agrees now that he deserves to be incarcerated until the end of his life for the heartless crimes he committed in 1972 at the age of 15. He acknowledges being a serial rapist and murderer, but at his September 10, 2020 public hearing held by the Michigan Parole Review Board, he reiterated that he wouldn't be where he was if it weren't for the influence of his older accomplice. On this episode of Murderous Minors, we visit Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the juvenile crimes of a man who will soon be walking their streets again. Be advised, this episode contains descriptions of rape. Michigan lifers with a parolable sentence handed down for crimes committed before October of 1992 have their cases reviewed after 10 years, then every 5. Koster was only granted this infrequent public hearing because the parole board member assigned to him took interest in his case. Following a psychological evaluation, a medical status report, and a report covering the details of his crime, conviction, and incarceration, the entire parole review board was presented the information and the majority voted to move on to this public hearing. Brent pleaded guilty to one count of second-degree murder almost 50 years ago, and all other charges were dropped after he testified against 28-year-old Danny Arthur Raines, who was determined to be the mastermind of the violent spree and who had also murdered on his own. At the September 2020 public hearing, the now retirement-age serial rapist and killer said in his opening statement, quote, "I have no desires whatsoever to commit any type of crimes. I just want to, be free. I've served almost 50 years and I am so sick of prison you would not believe it. I deserve to spend the rest of my life in prison, there's no doubt about that, but I would like to be given the opportunity to serve the rest of my remaining days in a free community, rather than die in prison. I realize what I did. I realize that it is horribly wrong, but if it was not for my co-defendant, I would not be sitting here." Brent Koster grew up in Cooper Township, Michigan, in Kalamazoo County. He described his early teenage years in court, how they were known as the kids in the neighborhood with a, quote, crazy mother. She was a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and Brent recalled that the majority of dysfunction in his home could be attributed to her. Though his alcoholic father yelled a lot, he was not physically abusive. His parents were still married and living in the same home, though his mother was frequently hospitalized, and his father's drinking caused enough of a distraction as to keep him from properly caring for his family. Brent called himself a typical foolish and immature teenage boy. At 13 and 14, he considered himself adventurous and burglarized at least 30 homes and businesses while also stealing cars for joyriding. His criminal activity got him involved in the juvenile system as well as placed in foster care. By 15, he was considered a runaway, staying in different neighborhoods with different friends and going to different schools. He described living in the Parchment School District to Barclay Hills, to Millwood in East Maine, and it was while there that a friend's mother began dating the man who would change his future. It was early summer of 1972 when 15-year-old Brent Koster met 28-year-old Danny Arthur Rains, and at first the man had a largely positive impact on the impressionable and wayward teen. Brent thought that Danny was smart, and he accepted the teen into his life and paid attention to him. Brent remembered how Danny told him all the things he wanted and needed to hear, talking about faraway places they could travel to and the exotic women who lived there. Danny offered Brent a glimpse into an adult world that the 15-year-old couldn't wait to be a part of. Soon after they met, Danny Rains stopped dating Brent's friend's mother and moved into his new girlfriend's trailer in the Colonial Trailer Park off of Sprinkle Road. Brent kinda just followed him there and also to work most nights at a standard service and gas station where he acted as somewhat of an unpaid intern. Once alone and while he worked, Danny filled Brent's head with tales of rape and murder. By 28, Rains had already done prison time after a community college student got away from him after being kidnapped at gunpoint from the drugstore where she worked. He was ultimately convicted of felonious assault and sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison in 1969. Brent described how Danny Rains took that as a lesson and promised that no victim would escape him again. He told Brent Koster that since being released he had already raped and murdered a woman by the name of Patricia Hawk, and Brent was able to corroborate the details. What Danny Rains was saying seemed true. 28-year-old Patricia Hawk's body had been discovered behind the Independent Elevator Company's building on Peakstock Road in Kalamazoo, Michigan 4 months earlier on March 19, 1972. When her 17-month-old son was spotted alone. An elderly woman walking in a field found the toddler boy covered in dirt and blood but couldn't find any injuries on his body. When she started looking for his mother, the woman found Patricia's body behind the building's grain elevator. The married mother had left home with her son earlier in the day to go shopping. Rains now told Brent that he wanted to commit a similar crime and that if the opportunity presented itself, they would take it. He referred to the act of murder as, quote, the medicine. Brent described being a 15-year-old blindly following this older guy that he saw as a father figure, telling the court, I concentrated on the sex. I did not concentrate on the murder, and only when it actually happened, that's when it really set in. I mean, it really, really got to me. The it Brent Koster referred to began on July 5th, 1972. A regular Wednesday night he thought they'd spend working at the Standard Station on Sprinkle Road in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Around 1 a.m., 19-year-olds Linda Clark and Claudia Bidstrup pulled in for gas and Brent filled their tank. They were just driving through from the northwest Chicago, Illinois area on their way to Ann Arbor, Michigan to possibly visit Linda's brother and maybe have a look at the university there. Little did they know, but Danny Rains had disengaged a spark plug when he popped the hood to check the fluid levels. He next had them pull into a service bay when their small car then failed to run properly. Linda and Claudia knew that the explanations Danny was giving them made little sense and got back in the vehicle, intending to take the car elsewhere in the morning, but as they inched closer to a clean getaway, the guys pulled knives on them. When questioned at the hearing, Brent explained that although this crime was not premeditated, the pair had loosely discussed taking advantage of a situation should the circumstances be in their favor. Regarding the weapons, Brent explained that the knife he had was a kitchen knife and that they didn't have guns or any other weapons. Danny pulling his knife on the girl in the driver's seat was Brent's signal to pull his knife, and also the signal that this situation fit the criteria the pair had previously talked about. Linda and Claudia had their hands tied behind their backs and moved to the empty van parked behind the station while Brent watched the register. After a bit, he went to the van and opened the doors and saw that Danny was raping Linda Clark, and soon after, Brent Koster raped her as well. Danny drove his girlfriend's car to the back of the station, and one girl was put into the back seat, while the other woman was put into the back seat of their car. He wanted Brent to murder both Linda and Claudia. He said it was time for him to have a taste of the medicine. Brent described how he, at 15 years old, attempted to strangle Claudia Bidstrup but only managed to render the young woman unconscious. He said that Danny came and checked her pulse and realized she was still alive. He took one end of the rope and gave Brent the other, and the two of them murdered Claudia together. Though the idea of sex and even rape intrigued him, the idea of murder didn't become a reality to Brent until after it had already happened. He said that he was obedient when told to commit murder and was hesitant, but was already, quote, knee-deep into this crime. He continued on to the back seat of the second vehicle and strangled Linda Clark to death as well. A gas can and both of the girls were then situated in the back seat of their car and covered with a blanket, at which time Brent was instructed to find a secluded location where the girls in their car could be destroyed. He told the court how he drove aimlessly east before finding a patch of woods near Galesburg, Michigan, into which he drove the girls in their car, going directly through a fence which ripped off the front bumper and popped a tire. He poured gas from the can all around and on the car before lighting a cigarette and placing it near a book of matches, hoping that would do the trick. The vehicle did not ignite, but Brent was long gone, following a nearby river on foot, then hitchhiking once he made it to the main road. Linda Clark and Claudia Bidstrup were reported missing 3 days after their murder, and their bodies were discovered in the back seat of their car 2 weeks later by a motorcyclist riding off-road. Danny and Brent remained uncaught and continued spending their nights at the Standard station where Danny worked. Brent said at his hearing that he spent that time trying to figure out how to get himself away from Danny Rains without implicating himself to the authorities or causing suspicion with his partner in the crimes. The authorities were sniffing around the pair, although they wouldn't realize until later that the van parked in the lot across from the gas station was actually police surveillance. Danny's prior rape conviction placed him on their radar once the women's bodies had been found. Danny Rains bought a new van and wanted to take it for a spin on the afternoon of August 5th, 1972. They had already decided that, should the opportunity present itself again, they'd take it. But when it did and they picked up a college girl hitchhiking, Brent explained that he shook his head no, indicating that he didn't want to rape and murder this woman. He said he did not have any desire to commit another rape or murder at all, and that Danny was irritated by this and quickly picked up another lone female hitchhiker, 18-year-old college student Pamela Fearnow, who was looking for a ride to Westland Mall. She had been an honors student